Greenlight Network presents Football Time.
Hey, and welcome to the Football Time Show. We're here for Week 10 of the NFL season. We're going live with our pregame format. We got a whole host of games this week, 7 in the 1 o'clock slot, 4 in the late slot. So it's an action-packed weekend. With us, as always, is our man Achilles Rain. Are you ready to get into Week 10, Achilles Rain?
Yeah, I mean, we're this is new for us. We're like an hour and a half away from kickoff. So I want to see if I got some good picks in here. I got my picks. I hope you got your picks, but I want to see if you can sway me on a few before the cutoff time comes by.
Yeah, definitely so. Before we get into this, let's get into Thursday's game. It sort of continues the upset trend the last 2 weeks. You aren't going to believe this, but if you had just taken the underdog, you'd have a winning record the last 2 weeks of the NFL season. So any of you who just want to bet straight up money line on underdogs, you would have done very, very well the last 2 weeks. I know you probably know that because you were probably on the other side of a lot of those.
Unfortunately, yeah, that was the case.
So let's kick things off on the Week 10 NFL season. Dolphins, Ravens. Interesting game. I think if this Dolphins defense had shown up like it has the last 2 weeks, they probably wouldn't have 3 wins on the season. They'd probably be in and around 500 and in the mix with everyone else. But was this more of it was good to see the Dolphins defense back, or more another letdown by the Ravens? They seem to be really, really hot and cold. Their offense is either flying or it's not being able to gain any yards here. What did you make of Thursday's game? Or you just make of it a Thursday game and we just move on?
Well, I mean, for the most part, Thursday night games aren't really, the most exciting games on the slate for that particular week. But I thought that we at least had a little upside here, especially early on in the season. When I looked at this particular matchup, I was like, okay, that has the potential to be a good matchup at that point in the season. We didn't foresee the Dolphins having the type of season that they're having. But I got to say, it was a bit surprising to see the final score of that particular matchup, but I wasn't too shocked. And it wasn't because I thought the Dolphins were great or anything. That it was, as I mentioned last week during our review show, the Ravens, even though I still think they're probably the best team in the AFC right now, they've shown several instances where they were almost beat by pretty bad teams. This isn't the first time that it's come this close against a bad team. And as I said before, all these teams are beatable. There's no such thing as an unbeatable team. There's some really good teams, but even they can lose to the bad teams. So this is a really weird season in the sense that I don't think anyone is unbeatable. I think that everyone is beatable. And if anyone overlooks anybody at this particular point, obviously we saw with the Bills and the Jaguars last week also, you can't overlook anybody in this league because this particular season, you can lose to just about anybody.
Yeah, definitely so. Last thing on this game, Dolphins now 3-7. You probably write them off of that playoff spot, though right now I don't know what record it is. And then I peeked at the Dolphins' schedule here, and they're about to go into a 4-game stretch where they're going Jets, Carolina, Giants, bye-week Jets. That could very easily be 4 straight wins. 4 straight wins puts them at 7-7. I wouldn't put it as likely, but I think if that defense plays like it's played the last couple weeks, it becomes at least a chance. We've seen this team go on little bit of runs the last couple seasons. Are you in total rate-off here, or are you maybe with this schedule, they can at least have a small little flicker of hope to get into that playoff mix?
Well, I mean, the schedule is definitely on their side. It favors them if they're going to try and make a push for a playoff spot. I think the biggest issue now becomes who you're chasing for that spot. Obviously, I still think the Bills, regardless of how they played over the last couple of weeks, are going to end up winning that division. But you have the Patriots who are actually playing pretty good football also. So I think it's going to become a race against the Patriots, whether the Patriots can maintain the momentum they've been building up over the last few weeks. And if that's the case, then I think it's going to be very hard for the Dolphins to try and squeak in. But I'm not going to put it past them, because this defense, the way it played this last week versus, a pretty potent Ravens team, I thought that looked almost about as good as we expected the Dolphins to be coming into the season. So if they can play ball like that and they can kind of figure things out on offense, I think they have a shot. It's a little far-fetched, but they have a shot, and that's all you can really ask for.
Yeah. Now, that being said, I gave you their next 4 games. They close the season at New Orleans, at Tennessee, versus New England. So they might get to 7-7, but I don't think that last 3 they're closing out probably undefeated there. So there is a path to get to 7-7, but at New Orleans, at Tennessee versus New England, that's not a very kind way to close out the schedule there.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, let's get into the games this week. Let's start out with our favorites, the Atlanta Falcons, going to the Dallas Cowboys. The spread here is at -8 for the Dallas Cowboys. Total sits at 55. First half total is 27, and the Cowboys are 4.5-point favorites in the first half. Interesting game here. I know I think I said on Tuesday I never want to bet on the Atlanta Falcons ever again. But
if I remember, you told me to talk you out of it if you tried to.
I'm not going to lie. I'm not fully invested, but I'm partially invested with this number at 8 here. Dallas coming off that bad loss to Denver where they didn't look all that good. Randy Gregory now been put on IR. That takes away 2 of their top 3 best pass rushers, which I think is concerning for this Dallas defense. And then if you look at Matt Ryan, I know we've been fooled by this before, but if you look at his last, I believe, 4 weeks, he's like the top quarterback in the league. So this Atlanta team, I don't want to go as far as good, but an 8-point spread really seems like a lot here in this matchup here. What'd you make of this game at the number at 8?
Listen, I'm there with you. I think that based off the performance of last week from Dallas and the way that Matt Ryan's been playing, as you mentioned it, he's actually been a pretty good quarterback. Now, in fantasy, not to mix up fantasy and regular gambling, but in fantasy, I have 2 quarterbacks. One of them is Matt Ryan, and the other one is Tennessee quarterback. And I really thought coming into the season that, I was going to get most of my points from Tannehill. I thought he was going to be my main guy. But in reality, most of my quarterback points are really coming from Matt Ryan, enough to the point where I actually made the switch, and I've got Tannehill now sitting in my bench, and I've got Matt Ryan as my every week starter. Not ideal, but just goes to show you that he's actually been performing a lot better than we really give him credit for. And a lot of that has to do with, the emergence of his wide receiver, former special teams specialist. He's actually been having a great year, and it's been helping out Matt Ryan a lot. So I see where you're coming from. I'm a little hesitant to take, 8 points against this Cowboys offense. I feel like if they were going to get back on track, this is definitely the week to do it. Atlanta's defense isn't really, keeping up offensive coordinators at night trying to figure them out. So it gives me a little bit of pause, but I do kind of like it. I think that there's definitely some wiggle room there. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think we're having some technical issues. I'm having a hard time hearing you. I can see your lips moving, but I'm having a hard time hearing.
There we go. I forgot to unmute the mic.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Listen, we don't normally do it live, so we got to kind of get in the flow of things here.
Yeah. Well, you wanted to mention. You mentioned. A couple things. I'm wiping off sort of last week's versus Dallas Cowboys showing. It's an NFL game. Sometimes those weird things happen. If it happens again, then we probably start to get a little worried. But that causes me a little bit of concern. And then you mentioned it defensively. Atlanta has been horrendous would be a kind way of stating it. Their secondary is really, really poor. So in this game, it probably will have to be a shootout. Now, that being said, These two teams have played a couple times in recent years, and it always has been a shootout, and it always has been a close, strange game. You'll remember last year's game, of course, with the spinning football that the Atlanta Falcons decided they didn't want to pick up. So that would be my hedge here, that I think this game will be close. Most, like all Atlanta games, are usually close. So the 8 stands out to me, but you're right in thinking that there is a very good probability, too, that this could be a Dallas blowout game, and we're just taking too much off Atlanta's win versus New Orleans last week. And if you watch that game, I rewatched that game, because I didn't watch it all that close last week because I didn't have a lot of action on it. And really, it was a nip-and-tuck, low-scoring game that whole first half, and then some strange things, turnovers, a couple plays happened, and it sort of opened up that score, and then New Orleans sort of got, a handful of points late. So, that score was a little bit misleading in that game, the way it played out, if you watch it that way. So maybe we bypass Atlanta for right now, but I do think it should probably be in there. I do think that number's just a little bit high. Now, it was probably much better when it opened at 10 a handful of days ago.
Yeah. At 10, I think I'd feel a little more comfortable.
Yeah, I think 10, I would be much more brazen on it than at the 8 there. But I do think this will be an interesting game to follow either which way, because I think Atlanta, really, if they can find a way to stay in this one, sort of takes that spot, in that wild card playoff position, and really has sort of control of that spot at the moment. All right, let's move on to our next game, and this will be one I have checkmarked. I'm curious what you're going to think about it. The New Orleans Saints go to the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee Titans are 3-point favorites here. Over-under sits at 43. The first half line is 2.5 for the Tennessee Titans. The total in the first half is 21.5. Now, as you probably know, the Dynamite is very big on this one this week, of course. He was very...
This lock of the week.
Yes, very, very hyped up at work today about his locks of the week, and the Tennessee Titans were there. Now, I didn't want to, burst his bubble, but I'm pretty big on the other side here. One, I think the Tennessee Titans coming off, a really, really tough 4-game stretch. I think they played a little bit above their heads in that St. Louis or the Los Angeles game. And not only that, if you really examine that game, their offense wasn't very good at all. I mean, in theory, if Stafford doesn't make those 2 turnovers, we're basically watching a, 6-3 football game. So I think it's a little overstated how good the Tennessee Titans have been in these last 4 weeks. You look at their turnover luck that's come along this season. It's been very, very high, so I think there's some regression coming back there. You look at their wins projected so far this season. They sit in and around 4, where the Saints sit in and around 6. So you look at that, Saints probably a better team. Then you look at the Football Outsiders matchup of these two teams, and really New Orleans rates higher than Tennessee. Tennessee sits at 14, New Orleans sits at 8. So I think getting +3 is really, really good here. I don't fear the home field advantage. I haven't, really factored in home field advantage a whole lot in a while, especially if you look this season. Actually, road teams have a winning record so far this season, and it's a trend that's continued since about 2019 when it was, I think they were 8 games behind road teams. Last year, it was even, and this year now, road teams actually have a winning record over home teams. So I don't factor that much in. The only thing that would be concerning here would be Alvin Kamara out for this game. But that being said, I'm not factoring in New Orleans offense really being the game changer here. I'm factoring in New Orleans defense being the game changer here and then finding enough points to win this. I'm curious your thoughts on this game.
Well, for this particular matchup, I already have my pick put in. And I'm actually on the same boat as you. When I was looking at this matchup, I felt, and now mind you, this is not based off any statistical information. This is just based off my own personal gut feeling and what I've seen on tape. And what that tells me is New Orleans defense tends to play to the strength of their opponents. If they play against a weaker opponent, they tend to kind of play down a little bit. When they play the big games like the Green Bays and stuff like that, their defense really tends to step up and play really good games. The Kamara situation is a little concerning for me, but I actually went ahead and I took the Saints in this one. As you mentioned it, the Titans have been balling out, okay? And I'm not trying to take anything away from the team. They've been playing great football. You're talking about wins against the Chiefs, wins against the Buffalo Bills, wins against the Rams. These are, playoff potential teams that they're beating. So I don't want to take anything away from them. They've been balling out. But as you mentioned, I feel like they're playing a little bit above their talent level as it sits. I thought that they would win that Ram game. I mentioned this several times, in private as we were having our personal conversations. And I thought a lot of it had to do with the fact that they had lost Henry, and they were probably going to go all in to try and win that game. Now, as you mentioned it, a lot of the issues for that game was because Matthew Stafford made some big mistakes that really cost the Rams. But they've been playing really good football, so I'm not going to take that away from them. I think that this is going to be a much tougher matchup than the last week was for them. And I think the Saints are going to be able to come out on top in this one. I think there's going to be some regression with Tennessee, and this is definitely a time to do it once their spirits are really high off those last couple of victories. So I have the Saints in this one, but again, this is just coming from more of a gut feeling than any statistical information.
Yeah, I just like it on both sides. I think there's going to be a letdown here with Tennessee, and I think the statistics just sort of speak towards the Saints overall. You look at Tennessee's offense; it's ranked 16 in total DVOA. New Orleans offense is ranked 17 in total DVOA. Then you go to the defensive side of things. The Titans defense is ranked 10th in total DVOA. New Orleans is ranked 3rd. So really the matchup that most benefits here is the New Orleans Saints. They probably have the best rush defense in the league. The Titans are going to try to get that running game going. It was not successful really versus the Rams. I don't foresee it being successful this week versus the Saints. And then it's, I mentioned the turnover luck that the Titans have had. I think that eventually will flip and bear out to our way. So I think we got our first mutual here. We're both a little hyped up on the New Orleans Saints this week.
Oh, that's going to get Dynamite going.
That, or he's going to send us updates every 5 minutes on how his pick is doing and how much money he's won.
Listen, not to get away from our picks show here, but I actually had a little text conversation with him this morning. I went out to breakfast with the wife, and I was going to drop something off for them at work, little snacks. And he's like, no, I'm getting ready to leave, so don't worry about it. But he mentioned that he had 2 pots of coffee today. So he's going to be super hyped up for this game. He's even missing out on one of his Tennessee Vols basketball games.
Yeah,
just
I know.
So he can
He's
watch
already
this
giving
football
up
game.
his season tickets. I already made the crack about it.
I personally would have gone, because if the Titans would win the game and you got to go see your Vols play basketball, it seems like a good day. But if you miss the Vols game and you lose, it seems like a double whammy to me.
Yeah, definitely so. All right, next up, Jacksonville Jaguars at the Indianapolis Colts. Colts are -10 here. 47.5 is the total. First half -6.5. Total sits at 23.5 here. Jacksonville Jaguars 2-1 out of their last 3 games. Of course, that one is the one I took, and they lost 42 to nothing. But we'll ignore that. Anyway, spread sits at 10 here. I do think there's a high chance for a blowout in this game, but I don't know if I'd be willing to really put the 10 into our mutuals here. Even though Jacksonville got that win last week, it wasn't like the offense really set the world on fire. So I'm curious your take on this game.
Yeah, I do definitely foresee this being a Colts victory. I definitely see the potential for it to be a complete blowout. But in a divisional matchup, 10-point spread, I'm way too conservative with my gambling for a 10-point spread. Even though I could definitely see it happening, I think the odds of it actually happening are much higher than most other games this week. But at 10 points, it's still just not enough. I just feel like I have to put in too much skin into the game to actually get that to pay out. And there's a little too much risk in there involved. So even though I like it, I think it's a decent pick. Personally, I'm staying away from that one.
Yeah, this would be one I might goof around and do some sort of, like large alternate line in case there's, really is a big blowout and that number doesn't come into effect. But I don't think I'd take the spread outright. Jacksonville's offense has been based around the run. It's very, very difficult to run on this Indianapolis Colts. You can't take advantage. Jacksonville hasn't been able to take advantage of teams' secondaries. I don't foresee them being able to take advantage of the Colts' secondary, which is really their weakness here. And overall, I just see the Colts sort of running the ball down their throat, hitting a couple play-action plays, and putting this one away. But you mentioned it. I don't think the 10s. It's just sort of a no-go for me.
Yeah, not for this particular matchup. I mean, you're talking about I really don't want to take a 10-point spread and sit there and watch a Colts-Jaguars game.
Yeah. All right. Next up, this one is pretty interesting. I have a lean on it, but I think you will have to convince me, or maybe your lean's going the other way, and we'll be just move on and see this game. But the Cleveland Browns go to the New England Patriots here. 2.5-point spread for the New England Patriots. Over-under total sits at 45. First half even. With a half point towards the Patriots, and the total sits at 21.5. I'm leaning a little bit Browns here, but I'm not like in love with it. You look at the Patriots, they've played better of late, but still you look at their wins, they aren't all that impressive. There are 2 versus their Jets, there's 1 versus San Diego, and then the one last week versus Carolina.
San Diego? How they managed to pull that one off?
The Chargers. They might as well be in San Diego with as many people that come to that stupid stadium. So
it's a long drive.
I lean a little bit Cleveland. Defensively, I think they have their favor here. Pressure on Mac Jones has really shown so far this year. He's been, much, much worse under pressure. I know that's stating the obvious, quarterbacks under pressure, but his numbers significantly fall. He hasn't shown the ability to sort of handle it and get rid of the ball under pressure. Cleveland's one of the best pass rushing teams, one of the few teams who can get front 4 pressure without sending blitzes. So I have that there. Then you look running back wise. Yes, Nick Chubb's out, but then on the New England side, both Harris and Ramondre Peterson are probably out as well. So you're really without either team's running backs. So I'm going to lean defensively here, Cleveland. But that doesn't mean I necessarily trust Cleveland and Baker Mayfield in a big spot like this. So I'm curious your thoughts on this game.
Well, I'll tell you this. I didn't take any action on this game. I did not take it in one of my parlays, and I didn't take any individual action in this game because I was torn. On one hand, I've got Wifey Sauce, who's a Patriot fan, and then I've got a lot of followers on Twitter that are actually Cleveland Brown fans, and I didn't really know which way to lean. Now, my heart tells me that Cleveland probably has an advantage in this game. Actually, my brain tells me that. My heart thinks it's probably the Patriots are starting to kind of get on a roll. Bill Belichick seems to be running a lot of that Shanahan-style offense with the running backs where you don't really know which running back's going to get the ball. As you mentioned, they have a couple of injuries going into this game, which I think probably hurt Cleveland more than they hurt New England because New England has been a little more gracious as far as who gets the touches and whatnot. So that situation, I think, hurts Cleveland a little bit more. But I think defensively speaking, even though New England can probably come up with a better scheme and a better game plan, I think that the better weapons on defense are in Cleveland. You go to the offensive side of the ball, I think that right now they're probably just at about even with all the injuries that are going on. So it's kind of a toss-up for me. I understand why the spread is what it is. If I had to lean any one way, I would probably lean towards the Browns here. Wife isn't behind me, is she?
No, she's
Making
not.
sure. Just making sure. I didn't want to take a broom to the head here. Yeah, if I had to pick, I would probably say it. I'm leaning more towards the Browns in this one.
Yeah, the other thing I really liked here is the under, sitting at 45. We mentioned both running backs on the teams are going to be out. I think both teams will come with pretty conservative game plans on two teams who run pretty conservative game plans as it is. So, and both defenses being really, really solid. So the under 45, I was curious if you had a thought on that. I really, really like that. The only thing that would scare me a little bit is, defensive scores, which could blow this up a little bit, really on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. I mean, that could definitely happen. I think a lot of it's going to depend, obviously, on the game plan offensively that the Cleveland Browns come up with. Because as I've mentioned several times now, Baker Mayfield is best when he's in a game manager role, when he's not asked to do too much. When he tries to do too much, he tends to kind of make mistakes, cause turnovers, and the Patriots are not the type of defense that you want to create, give them turnovers, because they'll definitely take advantage of it. So a defensive score would kind of scare me a little bit, but I think that the under on this one is actually a little enticing. I think that we probably will get more of a defensive struggle in this particular matchup. And if that's the case, I anticipate it being a low-scoring affair.
All right, well, let's put under 45. Let's put that down for now, and if we find something else, we'll bump it off. But so far, we're going with the Saints and the under 45 in the Cleveland Browns New England Patriots game. Next up, Buffalo Bills New York Jets. This is at 13. I don't know if we really have to analyze this game, but I'm not taking 13 with the Buffalo Bills till they prove they can at least score points on offense. So this is a pass probably on all sides, unless you have some reasoning that you think the Jets could cover this 13.
Oh, no, I don't think the Jets are going to cover that 13. I think the Bills are going to cover it, but I'm not going to take it until, as you mentioned, they get the ship right. And this is definitely the perfect opportunity for the Bills to get right. They've had a couple poor performances over the last few weeks, and there's nothing to heal someone's wounds better than facing up against the Jets. So get right, start scoring some points again, and we'll pick the Bills again next week.
Yeah, this might be one also where you take that alternate line, push it up to like 20, get good value, and if the Bills are rocking, they probably will annihilate that. But before we move on, I was just, usually we talk about this on Tuesday, but I wanted to get into it a little bit on the Bills side of things. They haven't been able to find a run game, and I think that's playing into why they haven't been able to hit their explosive plays. Teams are playing them a lot like the Chiefs and sitting in those too deep, just sending as many backs deep, and are like, you want to have 10, 15, 12 play drives, go at it. We aren't going to let you get behind us and hit, explosive plays. And Buffalo has not done the run game. I'm curious at what point, which they've shown in the past, in important games, they tend to run Josh Allen, a lot more. In the game last week versus Jacksonville, he had like 5 carries. I think if you up that into like Lamar territory and give him 15 carries, they probably win that game. So I'm curious on your thoughts on what your risk reward here. Would you up Josh Allen's carries and use him a little bit like he's more like Cam Newton than Lamar Jackson, but would you sort of utilize that since you really aren't getting anything for the run game, or you just play it by ear? Then in the playoffs, if you need to pull that fire alarm, you pull it in the playoffs. You don't pull it in the regular season.
Now, I'm usually very conservative when it comes to my play calling, my gambling, everything. But I think in this particular situation, because of the way they played over the last few weeks, they need something to feel good about. This Jets defense is definitely not a joke, okay? I'm not saying that they're a great defense, but they have the potential to get after quarterbacks. And we've seen it a couple times this season where they've actually made life really hard for the opposing quarterbacks. So the potential for that to happen is there. I think that the Bills need to get right. And I think that in order for them to get right, they have to win, and they have to win big. And that's going to take Josh Allen having to run the ball a few times. As you mentioned, he's not a Michael Vick. He's not the type of guy who's going to get you 40, 50 yards, per rush. Now he can, because, he's pretty quick for a big guy. but he's more like a Cam Newton, as you mentioned. He's the guy who's going to get you the 3-4 yards and first downs on third and shorts and things like that. And I think they're going to have to do that this game, even if they don't really need to do it. I think they're going to have to do it simply just to build some confidence and momentum. Then you can think about conserving it a little bit more once you get into the playoffs. But as we mentioned, no team this season is really a joke. I think that anyone can beat just about anybody, and the Bills know this firsthand based off last week's game. So they're going to have to run him a little bit. I don't like it, but I understand it. They're going to have to run him and get some momentum going, because that running game has been really lackadaisical as of lately.
Yeah, I just think you got to start pulling the trigger on it a little bit more, especially if you want to try to secure at least that 1 seed. I think that 1 seed is really, really important in the AFC, side of things, because I think there are just going to be some first-round matchups in the AFC that are just going to be too difficult, and you might not even make it into that, divisional or conference final. So I think you got to start running a little bit more. All right, let's move on to the Detroit Lions and Pittsburgh Steelers. Ben Roethlisberger out with COVID. This line was sitting at 9. I was a no-go on it, but it's dropped down to 6. Without Ben Roethlisberger there. So Pittsburgh sits at 6. Mason Rudolph is going to be the quarterback. 40.5 is the over-under. First half is 3.5. Over-under sits at 20. Now, I mentioned I was a no-go at 9, but I'm not going to lie. I'm intrigued by this 6 number here. The things that would be against it would be Chase Claypool is also out. So, without Juju, without Chase Claypool, you can't really take advantage of the Detroit Lions and their poor secondary. But, I don't know how much of right now a downgrade it is from Ben Roethlisberger to Mason Rudolph, if there's one at all. So 6 is enticing to me at that number. I'm curious if you think the Lions can sort of garner enough points to cover that 6, or we just don't take the Steelers any number above pick 'em.
Listen, the truth of the matter is that I've been supporting the Lions pretty much all season long, even when it didn't seem right or feel right. And I think a lot of it has to do with I've got some sort of guilty conscience here with Jared Goff. I feel like we did him dirty by sending him off to Detroit. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I've been so supportive of the Lions this season. And they haven't really repaid my kindness with any type of good performance. They did make some acquisitions, over the last couple of weeks, which could potentially help their offense out a little bit. But I just don't know if they can get any points up there. Jared Goff seems to struggle when, big situations come up, not necessarily big moments, but big situations in game. He tends to make some bonehead mistakes, which is one of the reasons why he's no longer in LA. He made too many of these mistakes. Now he's got a little bit of an excuse here with, lack of weapons and things like that. And on the other side of the ball for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I just think that you're a big Ben hater. Okay. And you seem to listen. I know he's not Big Ben of old, but they're winning games, man. They're winning games. They're in position to fight for a playoff spot right now. So I think we probably have to cool off of our Big Ben hating and give these guys a little bit of credit. I don't think the drop off is as tiny as you think it is. I think the drop off between him and his backup is actually quite huge, and I don't think it speaks to Ben Roethlisberger's, ability. I think it speaks more to the ability that's lacking from his backup quarterback. So with all that being said, even at 6 points, I would like to take the Lions. I really would, but I'm really scared just because they've let me down all season long.
All right, so you're on the Lions. I'm on the Steelers on this one, and a big Mason Rudolph career resurgence here as he leads this team. You can enjoy Ben Roethlisberger and his 2-yard passes. It's very
That's when he's at his best.
I think I saw a stat where he's completing like 15% of his passes over 12 yards. So.
Oh, that's pretty good. 15 is better than 10.
Yes, 15 is better than 10. All right, so you aren't down with the Steelers. and you aren't bold enough to sell me on the Lions here. 40.5 seems a little bit too low over under, especially with these two teams. We'll move on to an interesting game here. Tampa Bay, Washington. Tampa Bay 9.5-point favorites here. A lot of receivers out for the Tampa Bay Bucks in this game. Washington coming off a bye. And really, if Tampa's coming off a bye as well. If you've looked at teams coming off a bye, it's been a little bit boom or bust. They either play really well or really poorly. Mostly because since they negotiated that practice thing, teams haven't been really able to practice during buys. So I think they come in a little bit, off center. So 9.5 bucks. I kind of think this is going to be a blowout, but then part of me thinks Washington gives one last push here. Maybe the defense gets a little bit righted, and they can put some pressure on Brady, especially with a lot of his receivers out here. I'm curious your thoughts on this game.
I thought Washington looked a little bit better in their last performance. Not that they looked up to the level that we expected them to be at prior to the season starting, but I thought they were headed in the right direction. The problem is that it's a little too late at this point. I think that the Cowboys are leaps and bounds better than the Washington football team is, and they're starting to make strides, but at the wrong time. I don't think they can catch the Cowboys at this point, so I think it's all for nothing. With that being said, we haven't seen enough of it to really feel comfortable about it. I know Tampa Bay's got a bunch of guys out, but you're talking about Brady, and he can make any guy look like a top wide receiver. So I'm not going to take any action on this. The spread sits a little too high for me with all the injuries and the poor team on the other side. So I'm not going to take any action on this, but I think this is going to be an easy Bucks win.
All right, so we'll move on past this one. A part of me wants to sort of think this is going to be an easy Bucks win, but the number looked a little too crooked, and I think I'm just scared of a weird Washington output. So,
what are you thinking?
I want to take Bucks, but I don't want to take Bucks because I just don't want to have that sort of burden of the 9.5, and then randomly Chase Young is good for 1 week out of the season when he hasn't been good all season long. So, I think we just probably better off passing on this one and just moving on to a different game. Next up, Carolina Panthers, Arizona Cardinals. Cardinals 8.5-point favorites here. Kyler Murray, Hopkins going to be out for this one. First half, 5.5 for the Cardinals, 20.5 on the over-under here. I'm not going to lie. Yes, P.J. Walker is playing quarterback, but with this Panthers defense and Colt McCoy sitting back there, I'm not buying 8.5-point cover for this team. I'm curious why you think this number is what it is. Even if Kyler Murray is back, I still think this Carolina Panthers, defense is just built with its speed and aggressiveness to sort of contain Kyler Murray. So, 8.5. It was 9.5, earlier before we had the official news of Murray and Hopkins being out. But with both of them out, 8.5 just seems like a gift here, even with P.J. Walker. But Christian McCaffrey's going to be there, and quite honestly, I don't think anybody can be worse than Sam Darnold. Basically, just don't turn the ball over. I think you can cover this line.
Yeah, as you mentioned, that I think that this number is a little I don't know, diluted, if dilute is the right word for this, but it seems like it's a little bit, a lot of it has to do with the previous performance for the Arizona Cardinals going up against the 49ers. And you saw Colt McCoy had an outstanding game for a backup quarterback. Now, if Kyler Murray was sitting there, I'd probably feel a little more hesitant taking this, but I'm thinking the Panthers are the smart pick in this one. I don't think there's a way that Colt McCoy can put up that type of performance 2 weeks in a row, especially against this Carolina defense.
No Green either. I should mention Green and Hopkins both out. And Rondale Moore's coming back from a concussion. So it's a lot.
And don't they have their running back? Don't they have their running back also hurt?
Edmonds is out, so it's Connor again as the sole back.
Now, Connor played pretty good last week. I'll give him that. Especially from a fantasy perspective, he put up a lot of points, but statistically, he still had a pretty good game. Not amazing, but pretty good game. He scored a couple of touchdowns and everything. But it's hard for me to really visualize these Cardinals performing like that back-to-back weeks with all the injuries that they're dealing with. I think that people are giving them too much credit for that San Francisco win, when in reality, San Francisco just didn't show up. There's a reason why we had them on our worst of the week last week, because that should have been a game that they should have won. And if they were, even a little bit decent, they would have won that game, but they didn't. And I don't think it was so much about the Cardinals as much as it was about the 49ers and them not showing up. So going up against the Carolina defense, Christian McCaffrey's back. Darnold's not in at quarterback, so that's probably a positive. And then I'm sure the team's pumped up about re-signing Cam. I don't know what he's going to do there, but he is a pillar of that community. He spent many years there, so I'm sure that the fans and everybody are going to be pretty hyped up about Cam being back, at least in the Panther, sideline. With all that being said, I think the Panthers are the smart pick in this one. I think the Cardinals are due for a letdown, and I think this is going to be the week for it. So I'm going to take the Panthers in this one.
Yeah. The other thing, I mentioned the Titans having, turnover luck, and the Cardinals have had amazing fumble luck. They've had 15 or 16 fumbles against. They've recovered 12 of those. They themselves have had 16 fumbles. They've only lost 2 of them.
Wow.
That's just one of those freaky things that will not continue.
The ball's rolling their way.
Yeah, the ball has rolled their way, which, we don't want to, say sometimes football is just a matter of a bounce and luck, but a lot of times in games that are so close like that, if a ball bounces into an Arizona player's, hands, they don't get a fumble. And then on the other side, they fumble and it bounces into a defensive player's hands on Arizona. That's a huge swing. So, I look for some regression to come up at some point in that fumble luck. So I don't necessarily know if it's going to be this week, but I do think that's coming as well. So I think the play here is easily Carolina and that plus 8.5. We both pretty aggressive on that one. So I think that'll be our third pick of the week. Carolina plus the 8.5. All right, next up, this one. If you're gambling on this, you should probably call the gambling hotline. The Minnesota Vikings versus the Los Angeles Chargers here. 3.5 for the Chargers. I have no interest of taking the Chargers at that high a number, especially with their secondary in shambles. They haven't been able to stop the run all season long. That scares me off of them, especially since I'm assuming Minnesota is going to hand the ball to Dalvin Cook or Alexander Madison for that matter and control this whole game. But what I've seen from Minnesota's defense, they have a lot of injuries. They have a bunch of COVID scratches. I'm not 100% sold that their defense is going to lock anybody down in this one. And then just overall, both these teams find ways to do stupid things and cost bettors money. So I'm just a no-go automatic cross-off here. I'm curious if you have a feel one way or another.
I actually do kind of have a feel. And it's not one that I would really suggest people to take, but I'll tell you what my thought process is on this. So we know how good that Chargers offense is. They're actually really good. They have a nice, young quarterback who can get the ball to his wide receivers, and Eckler's really good from the backfield. He's really good at catching passes. They're a very explosive offense. With all that being said, they're dealing with a little bit of injuries. Mike Williams has been kind of banged up over the last few weeks, and you've seen a regression in his play, which in turn has put a regression in the entire passing game. And then you look at the offense side of the ball for Minnesota, probably one of the most potent offenses in the league that can go for 40 at any given day. Their biggest issue is that they have no defense. And that's the issue with the Chargers as well, is they have no defense. They can't even stop a nosebleed. So I predict this is going to be a little bit of a shootout. My only concern is who's got a more potent offense. Even though I think the Chargers have a more polished offense, I think the Vikings have a more potent offense as far as weapons are concerned. So if this was like a 2.5 point spread for the Chargers, I'd probably feel comfortable with them possibly sneaking off with a field goal win at the end. But with with it being that hook at 3.5, I think that the Vikings are good in this one. I think they might even keep it close enough to where, they'll be able to cover that spread. Now, I know, like I said, I wouldn't recommend anybody take it this particular bet, but I kind of like the Vikings here at plus 3.5.
Yeah. I want to, but I just can't do that because I'll look up, they'll be up 21-0, and then the next thing you know, it'll be 28-21, and they'll have missed 7 field goals to precede the blown lead. I just can't get. I think the spread tells you to take the Vikings here at the plus 3.5, but I just can't make myself do it, and I'm not going to take the Chargers, having bet on them last week and narrowly.
I'm going to tell you right now,
escaping that visit to Philadelphia.
I'm going to tell you right now, since I'm taking action on this game, these are the 2 possible scenarios that it's going to turn out. Either the Chargers are going to win by 3, and they won't cover their spread, or Minnesota is going to miss a field goal here and there, and the Chargers will actually cover that spread, and then I'll end up losing money. One way or another, I'm going to find a way to lose money because that's what I'm really good at. So
somebody's fumbling a ball out of the end zone and giving the other team a touchback. I know that.
It's possible.
All right, next up, Philadelphia at Denver. Denver's 1-point favorite here, 44.5 is the total. Half point towards Denver at halftime line, 21.5 at the over-under. I really like Denver here, which I didn't think I'd be saying a lot, but I think this matchup really is good for Denver. One, they started running the ball the last week and pounding them. I think they'll be able to run the ball on Philadelphia. The other thing is Philadelphia's defense has given up, short, consistent throws at a 70% percentage. And if there's someone who completes short, consistent throws, it's Teddy Bridgewater. It ought to be renamed for him. So I think Denver will be able to keep this ball pretty much this whole game and just win this game here. Pretty easy. But you can also talk me out of it. I don't know if I can believe that Denver's going to win 3 straight games in a row after they essentially tried to fold up the season and basically be the division leaders out here. But I don't know. I can't buy Philly winning a road game here versus Denver. I'm curious for your thoughts.
Now, I'll start off by saying this, okay? I had all similar type of roller coaster emotions that you just mentioned. With the Broncos, we've been supportive of the Broncos on this show for a very long time, and they seem to let us down, in several instances. And we kind of let off the gas pedal a little bit when it seemed like they were basically having a fire sale, like they were calling the season quits. And then they started winning games. So I don't know what was going on there. I will say this. I don't think I've taken a Eagles team to win, except for maybe once this season. And I believe that was the game against San Francisco. Besides that, I don't think I've taken any action with the Eagles. I think I've usually gone against the Eagles. And it's actually bit me in the behind. I don't know why, but I've got a feeling that this is an Eagles game to win. Jalen, listen, the quarterback is not super explosive, but he's not going to put up a lot of yards through the air, but he makes plays. He makes enough plays to keep his team in it. And I don't know why I've got this weird feeling that this is going to be one of those games where Denver gets ahead and it seems like it's going to be an easy win, but then Philadelphia comes clawing back in and they just control the ball for the rest of the game and end up with a win. I don't know why I feel that way. I'm not telling anyone to lean that way. I'm not trying to talk you out of your pick, but I kind of like the Eagles in this one.
All right, so we're a little split on the Eagles and Broncos. We'll move on to our next game. This one was one I automatically crossed off as well. Seattle and Green Bay. Rodgers is a go, though he hasn't practiced in 2 weeks. Russell Wilson is a go. I don't know how healthy he really is. Packers are 3-point favorites here. Over under sits at 49. First half 2.5. Over under sits at 24. My lean here is taking Seattle in the +3, but I don't know. Call me a coward. I'm just scared to take against Rodgers here versus Seattle Seahawks team. Even if he hasn't been there for 2 weeks, we don't know, really how sick he actually was. He actually did have COVID. He didn't, it wasn't a, close thing. He was actually sick with COVID. So I don't know if he can recover. If you remember last year, like Cam got sick from COVID and basically was never good again and got cut.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is that or, his inability to throw the football forward anymore. But, I just don't know what I'm going to get from Green Bay, which makes me lean towards the Seahawks, especially getting Russell Wilson back. I think that offense can be explosive, but I sort of want to see a game from Russell before I start throwing money down on him, especially on the road in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers back there.
Now, I will say this. I'm going to start off by saying that I do love Russell Wilson, okay? And this is weird coming from a Ram fan, because he's a divisional rival. And basically he's been our enemy going back and forth in the NFC West since he's been in the league, basically. But I do love Russell Wilson. I think the guy's magic. I think he makes magic happen. I'm not going to jump on his bandwagon yet till I see a full game from him coming off the surgery. We don't know how recovered he is. I know that they wouldn't really clear him to play unless they felt he was ready to, but also they're within the race. So I feel like if they had to rush him back, they probably would, just because they're in the hunt. With all that being said, I'm taking the Packers in this one. Okay. And I'll tell you why. Yes, Rodgers didn't practice. Yes, he dealt with COVID, but he's Rodgers. He doesn't need practice. This guy's a vet. He's been doing it a long time. He can take weeks off at a time and come back and look like he didn't miss a beat. So I'm not concerned about Rodgers. I am concerned about, as you mentioned earlier, the ability of him to actually be healthy enough to perform well on the field. We saw with Cam Newton when he got COVID. You mentioned he couldn't throw the ball afterwards. That's actually one of the symptoms of COVID. That's how I test myself for COVID, actually. I go out to the front yard, I grab the ball, toss it a few times. Now, unfortunately, you've seen my throws. So I think I'm positive for COVID. So just to be safe, I'm going to put this on. No, I don't have COVID. But, yeah, I can't pick against Rodgers as much as I love Russell Wilson, and I'm happy that he's coming back because it makes for better matchups. I'm upset he's back because I'm a Ram fan, but it makes for better matchups. I'm still taking the Packers in this one. I think the Packers are more well-prepared. I think they're playing in Lambeau Field, which is obviously a huge boost for them. And I think that Rodgers is probably trying to come out and make a statement after all the drama that he dealt with for making a personal choice.
Yeah, definitely so. I think if Seattle wants to get in the playoff, I don't put them out, especially in the NFC side of things. They have to win one of these next two games. Either Green Bay or Arizona are their next two games. They're going to have to split those. They can't afford to lose both and get to 3-7. But I think if they can get to 4-6, that keeps them right there in the race. So I'd just be too scared, really, to go against Seattle here. Especially when you look at Green Bay, who's pretty much got their division locked up with Minnesota, Chicago, and Detroit in it. So I do think it's one of those that means a little bit more to Seattle. So I sort of lean more towards that +3. So another interesting matchup. Let's move on to the next one. I will say your boy Dynamite was hot on this one as well. Once again, I'm leaning towards a little bit the other side of this one.
Let me guess, he likes the Raiders.
No, he likes the Chiefs.
Okay.
I'm leaning a little bit more towards the Raiders here. So we got Kansas City Chiefs, Las Vegas Raiders, 2.5 points for the Kansas City Chiefs favored on the road here. I'm curious your take on this. I don't know. A part of me does not want to take the Raiders here just because I think, the Ruggs off the field stuff factors in, but also the on the field stuff factors. That's their most explosive deep threat receiver. You look at his couple games he got to play versus the Chiefs, he annihilated them. You have the weird thing with the cornerback who they cut on Monday. So, yeah, I think the Raiders still are in flux here, but nothing about the Chiefs have told me they should be favored on the road versus a team they have struggled with the past couple of years. One of the few teams they have struggled with. So I'm curious your thoughts on this game.
Yeah, I mean, going back to last season, we saw that Chiefs-Raider game. The Raiders were actually the first team to beat the Chiefs last season. And this is when the Chiefs were playing serious Chiefs ball. I'm talking about putting up big points, big yards, and the defensive holes weren't as obvious because of how good the offense was performing. And the Raiders made a game out of it. Not only made a game, they smacked them in the face and they took that win. So I get where you're coming from. I just think that there's too much drama going on with the Raiders right now. And besides that, I feel like one of those cows in the middle of the road, when you're driving down those one-way type roads and the cow gets in the way and you're honking your horn, that cow is not moving. It is not going to budge. That's how I feel with the Chiefs. I know how bad they are. I know that car can hurt me, but I just can't find a way to move. I don't know what it is. Something about the Chiefs, there's an allure, there's an aura about these Chiefs that even though they've been playing horribly, probably one of the worst teams in the league, to be completely honest, even with all the weapons that they have on there, they're probably one of the worst teams in the league. I have a hard time picking against them. And was it a 2.5 point spread, which is basically a pick 'em type game? I like the Chiefs.
Yeah, I can't do the Chiefs right now. Their offense.
I understand.
So bad. I think people think this offense has been bad like all year long, but at the start of the season, their offense was just fine. The first 4 games of the season, they were still scoring on 40% of their possessions. That's really, really good. But these last 3 weeks, they're scoring on 10% of their possessions. And then, you look at the numbers last week. I know you shouldn't look at numbers wholly, but, everybody is giving Jordan Love, shtick for being so bad. Whose numbers were pretty much the exact same as Jordan Love's?
Yes,
it was Patrick Mahomes over on the other side. So, it's just, I don't think I could trust this team. We could also go into their against the spread record, which is 3-21-1 over the last 2 seasons, which they have not been an underdog. They still are not an underdog.
Yes, but also to be fair, I think this is probably one of the lowest point spreads with them as favorites that we've had in over the last 2-3 seasons.
Yeah, it's getting closer and closer to them being not
underdogs.
A favorite in one. I think if they score 13 points again in this one, maybe the next week they might not be favored anymore. But yeah, I guess we're split on this one as well. Next one coming up, an interesting one for you. The Los Angeles Rams go to the San Francisco 49ers. We were going to have a big discussion on Odell Beckham and how he fit in here. But I guess with Robert Woods blowing out his ACL, he fits a little bit better. He doesn't have to be the 3/4 receiver. Let's go to Thursday on the original signing before we knew Robert Woods got hurt. Were you a big fan of the signing, or were you a little mixed?
No, I was super confused. To me, the news came out of left field. I was actually just getting home from work when I started getting texts. People were like, "Oh my gosh, the Rams, really? The Rams?" And I was like, "The Rams what? I'm like, what are they talking about?" So I went online and started digging, and I saw we signed Odell. And the first thing, now, mind you, a few years back, probably 5 years back or so, when they were talking about possibly trading Odell, when he was still with the Giants, I wanted Odell. I was like, oh, he would be such a perfect fit with the Rams, and he would be a nice target for Jared Goff, and all the typical stuff that you salivate over when you're talking about star wide receivers. But when I read about it, I was like, why? Were they even in the hunt? I don't remember even hearing them being contenders for the Odell Beckham sweepstakes. I couldn't figure it out. And it didn't make sense to me. The only thing that I could think of after I sat down and really tried to contemplate the whole situation was maybe they just didn't want him to go to the Packers. And, they really didn't pay an arm and a leg for him. It actually came pretty cheap, all things considered. So with all that being said, I'm like, is it really out of the realm of possibility to say we're willing to spend a couple $1 million to make sure he doesn't go to a team that we could potentially be facing, a team that knocked us out of the playoffs last season? And that's the best reasoning I could come up with. Now, I love Bobby Woods. To me, Robert Woods is probably, one of the most underrated receivers in the league. Now, he hasn't been getting as much love this season from his quarterback. That's because Cooper Kupp is having an amazing season. I've talked about Cooper a lot, but he hasn't really been talked about as much as I think he deserves to be talked about. He's having an astounding season. And with all that being said, Robert Woods to me is still a very critical part of that offense. You take him out of that offense now, and I think the signing of Odell Beckham actually kind of worked out because he doesn't necessarily have to be the third option per se. He can be that second option, and even in certain plays be the first option. We saw this last game with the Titans. They didn't really go to Cooper Kupp a lot in the beginning of that game. It seemed to be a lot of, passes to Robert Woods and the tight ends and, even the running backs at some point. But I don't know. I just, if we're going back to last Thursday when it happened, I'm not a fan of it, not crazy about it, but I understand it. Fast forward to Sunday, a game before the Ram game against the rival 49ers. And I'm actually super glad that it worked out because now, as you mentioned, we have the depth that we would have needed at wide receiver, barring an injury. So I think we're good to go for the rest of the season now.
Yeah. 2 points on that, and then we'll get into the game. Thursday when it was announced, I had two trains of thoughts. Ram-wise, I thought it was a no-lose situation because basically you get him in there, for free. And, if he whines and cries and, doesn't like being the number 4 receiver, you cut him without, any problem whatsoever, much like they did with, Deshaun Jackson. He didn't like, not getting on the field a ton, and it's like, okay, bye. I think you could have done the same thing with Odell there. I didn't quite understand it for Odell's perspective. You were going essentially to a team where you were probably going to be the third, but Van Jefferson plays, a lot of that slot, and Odell's more, deep, receiver. So I don't think it would have been a lot of the same thing. So he might have been playing, out of 4 wide coverages there a lot, depending on what they did with Higbee. So I didn't understand it from his perspective. I thought he had better options, but, I guess it worked out this way. The thing that concerns me, you talked about Robert Woods being underrated, and he's their best wide receiver blocker. He's not quite, Hines Ward like level, but if you watch a lot of their run plays and a lot of their stuff, he's the one they bring down to sort of wham that defensive end. And I don't know how they are going to make up for that. I think they could probably make up and scheme, for the catches. I don't know if Odell's even as good as Robert Woods is, at this point in time. But I do worry. We saw blocking issues, last week in that Tennessee game. We saw, the same sort of problems in that Arizona game. And now you lose your best wide receiver blocker, who was their best blocker for that run game. I've already thought they've started to go a little bit too far out of the run game and turn this into, let's just drop back and throw every time. It looking more and more like a Matthew Stafford, Detroit Lions team. Let's just sling it and see what happens. Now, it helps to have one of the top 5 defenses in the league, so you don't lose every game that way. But I didn't like the way the offense looked. It'll be interesting to see what they can do with Odell, but I think that Robert Woods, I'm very curious to see how this run game looks without him in it, as they seem to struggle blocking. But let's get into this game here. 49ers 3.5-point dogs at home. Fun stat going around. San Francisco has not won in Levi Stadium since 2019. Now,
Gosh.
granted, they didn't play there during their COVID season, so. But
Okay, I forgot about that.
but still sounds
A fun
weird,
stat.
and they haven't won there this year either. So 3.5 point dogs here. 3 points at the first half line with a 24 over under 50 for the game. Curious about your thoughts here. I'm leaning a little bit Niners just because I think this is the Niners' last gasp. If they can't hang on here, their season's wrapped up and done with. The Rams probably want to bounce back, but I think they have a few more games to play with. I don't know if the Niners do. So I'm more like the Niners have to throw everything into this game. So I like the 3.5 here. I'm curious to your thoughts on this one.
Well, see, I follow the logic and I understand your point, and I'm actually with you there. This is definitely the last gap for the 49ers. You anticipate, a lot of emotion from them, in this particular matchup. You're going up against a divisional rival in the Rams, which they always play tough, by the way. Even when the Rams were really good, the Niners-Rams always one of the better matchups within the division, in my opinion. With all that being said, I think the Niners are going to choke. And it's not because I'm a Ram fan. This is just my own perspective here. You look at last week when they were going up against the Cardinal team that they should have beaten on paper. A Cardinal team was really banged up. They were obviously ahead of you in the division. So this is your chance to make up ground. And they completely choked. They let Colt McCoy look like Peyton Manning. They let Colt McCoy look like Tom Brady back in a Super Bowl run. And you just can't have that. And for me, that was a huge tell that this 49er team is really not as good as we've been giving them credit to be. And I'll be honest with you. I thought they were going to be one of those tough contenders coming into the season, and they really haven't shown it. And we've made excuses for them back and forth, whether it's injuries, whether it's personnel issues, whether it's coaching mistakes. We constantly make excuses for them. And I think that at this point, I'm over the excuses. They didn't show me what I needed to see last week to really give me pause at picking my team this week, which I usually have a hard time doing. I don't like picking my own team because, again, it feels like a double whammy if they lose. You lose money and your team lost. But the Niners haven't shown me anything. So 3.5 points. I know the Rams have some things to figure out on offense, but I'm taking the Rams in this one.
Yeah, you don't have to push me very hard to come off my Niners pick. I don't even think I'm going to bet it, but I think.
Let me just remind you before you keep going. What was it that you called the head coach for the 49ers?
Well, I will say he's now behind Tony Soprano as the win percentage there. So he's dropping down the coaching leader charts. I just think that 3.5. I don't like it off that key number, and I'm scared the Niners are going to go for, broke in this one a little bit like the Lions went for broke in it. So I just don't like that 3.5 on the road. And you mentioned the Rams have tended to struggle versus the Niners in the last couple of years past. So I'm off that one. So what do we have? 3 mutuals right now. We got to come up with 2 others.
Yeah, I think we have. I don't have my pen with me today. I was not prepared for the show as I basically pulled into my driveway and ran upstairs to get set up. But
I think we have 3 mutuals. I think we have the Saints at +3. We have the under in the New England Cleveland game at 45. And then we have what was our third one here? Carolina plus the 8.5 as our third one. We were both leaning a little bit towards Cleveland and the +2.5. So let's put that one as our fourth, pick there. And then lastly, you liked Minnesota. I thought the line benefited Minnesota. That seemed to be the closest one we were on together. So let's have Minnesota plus the 3.5 as our fifth one in this one.
Okay. That seems fair.
All right. So that's an exciting group of bets we got going on for mutuals. Let's get into our picks of the week. I got, I think, 4 picks for me. How many picks you got for yourself?
I'm trying to count off the top of my head here because, like I said, I'm not prepared like I normally am. Not that I usually am, but usually more prepared than I am now. I think I have like 4 or 5.
All right, I'll start off. I'm going to ride the Atlanta plus the 8 versus the Dallas Cowboys and be disturbed as I watch Atlanta screw me over for the 500th billionth time in my life. So Atlanta plus the 8 for me.
And I'm actually going to kick it off with one of our mutuals here, taking the New Orleans Saints at +3.
All right. I'm riding the Saints as well at +3. So we're both on that Saints one pretty good. Hopefully we can send fun gifts to Dynamite.
I'm hoping, man, after last week, I got to get him back at some point.
All right. What next for you?
For my next one, I am taking the Carolina Panthers at +7.5.
All right. We're both on that one as well. We're both Carolina plus the...
Wasn't it 8.5 like 10 minutes ago?
Yes, that's what happens when you do games at 12:30. We have 8.5 because
Okay.
I took it at 10 a.m. today. So actually, by the way, if you shop around, you could have gotten 9.5, which might be what I have. But I'm also shopping at 5 different sports books, unlike some people who just take the 7.5 and lose a 3-point line move there. But
hey, listen. If I keep sticking with them, BetMGM. Maybe we'll get a sponsorship at some point. I don't know.
Well, I run them and everybody else, so they can all sponsor us. I'm happy shopping lines and giving me the best one possible. So we'll take that one. And the next one for me, Pittsburgh Steelers minus the 6. I'm riding the wave of Mason Rudolph.
Okay, for my next one, I'm going to take the Green Bay Packers -3.
All right, my last one, the Denver Broncos at -1 for me.
My last 2 is the Kansas City Chiefs at -2.5 and the Los Angeles Rams at -3.5.
Oh, he's going with the Rams. All right. Be sure to like and subscribe. You don't want to miss any of our content. Our review show will be on Tuesday. The Dynamite will be back this week for our college football show. We'll have our college basketball preview show and Winning Daily, of course. You don't want to miss any of that. Achilles, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at TDAchilles.
All right, that's our show, and we're out.